Sorry, but I did. I remember.
Yes, she's
Great.
ready to start.
Thank you, thank you. So before we get started, if everybody could please mute themselves except for Morgan. I'm Harriet Berg. I think I know everyone on this call, and I am really, really excited about our community partner of the month for the month of November, which is the Park City Museum. So with us today, we have Morgan Pierce, who is the new executive director of the fabulous museum on Main Street. And I also want to welcome Mary Wheeler, who's here, who's also a friend of mine and on the board of the Park City Museum and who originally introduced me to Morgan. So Mary, thanks for logging in as well. And so I just can tell you personally that I have been to the museum 2 times as of recent. And every time I go in, I find something new that I didn't see. And I even asked Morgan the other day, I saw this great area and it was like so amazing, and is it brand new? And he's like, no, it's been there. So it's a fabulous Park City gem. And so if you haven't been, I encourage you to go. It's great. So with that, Morgan, tell us a little more, please.
Well, Harriet, the reason you always see something new in the middle of the night, every night, the Tommyknockers come into the museum and they change something and then they escape back to the mines. But thank you so much, Harriet. Thank you everyone for joining. Morgan Pierce, I am the museum's executive director. I am new to, not only am I new to Park City, I am new to Utah, having moved in June and begun this job in July. So the next half an hour or so will be pretty easy for me. I get to talk about what I love, history, and in particular, this museum. I've moved from Virginia. I've worked in museums across the country. And so this truly is a passion of mine. So I think you're going to get that sense as I am talking here. But one of the reasons I'm speaking to you today, not only have I kicked it off with Harriet, and have we had several conversations about this, but one of the first things that I've wanted to do, or one of the things that I want to implement moving forward, is to try to figure out how to become more involved with our community. Obviously, that could mean me going to meetings and speaking, or meeting and speaking with everyone here via Zoom. But our front window in our museum store, we do change several times throughout the year. But I thought that that would be one fantastic idea, to introduce other community organizations to Main Street here in downtown or in the historic district in Park City. So that's what we are going to be doing for you beginning on November 15th and running for the next several weeks into mid-December. And then in conjunction with that, I am here today to talk with you. So what I wanted to give you a brief history about the museum. Also, I'm going to test out this new presentation method. My laptop is on a podium on wheels. I'm going to spin you around and I'm going to show you some of the highlights here in the museum galleries. I'm going to talk to you about our next exhibit coming up, and then talk about some of the different ways that you could come and volunteer, or how you could come and visit us here at the museum. So let's get started with the history. The museum moved into its location here at 528 Main Street in 1984. At that time, we were just in the first floor of the old Park City Library, built about 1901, as well as the first floor of the City Hall building, built 1885, offices on the second floor. The years went by, and then something happened in 2002. Millions of people came to Utah. The Winter Games came to Utah, and we had 25,000 visitors come in just that 1 month of February 2002. A 1,200 square foot museum and 25,000 visitors. So we realized very quickly we needed more space. We also had objects in storage all around the county. We had objects in garages and board members' houses. So we knew that we needed additional space. And thankfully, we had some incredible partners, primarily the Park City Municipal Corporation, who helped us. And over the next 7 years, we fundraised and raised approximately $9 million to add on to the historic buildings on Main Street. So now you have this incredible juxtaposition of the historic facades on Main Street, and then you have the 2009 addition on the back. So today, visitors, we do recommend 45 minutes to an hour and a half to visit. We have 3 levels. We have 12,000 square feet, and we were able to condense all of those various off-site storage locations that we had throughout the county in board members' basements and garages. Also, 4 years ago, we opened an auxiliary building, our education and collection center, where we host our programs and our lectures, and where we're able to store all of the items that we do not have on display. So we opened this big, fantastic, brand new museum in 2009. And we're able to bring some of the iconic objects from the museum collection here to the galleries for display. So I'm going to try to get used to standing on the side here just so I can show off some items. But one of the real showstoppers in the museum is the stagecoach that you can see, even if you don't pay for admission. If you pop your head in and just look into the galleries, you can't miss the Kimball stagecoach. But with Park City being incorporated in 1885, a few years prior, 1869, silver was discovered. But obviously there needed to be a method of transporting the mail up and down Parley's Canyon, back and forth from Salt Lake City. So from the 1870s and 1880s, this stagecoach was the stagecoach that would have been drawn by 4 or 6 horses up and down from Salt Lake to Parley's Canyon every single day, delivering the mail, and if there was room, delivering passengers as well. That trip today, I know because that's my work commute. It's about 40 minutes for me to get home. But for that commute 130 years ago, it would have required 4 stops from here to there. At each of those stops, you would have stopped to either feed and redress the horses, or you would have changed and had a brand new team of horses as well. So it would have required 4 specific stops on that stagecoach route. The stagecoach stopped operating in about 1890 because the railroad had finally made it to Park City, and the railroad was now transporting the mail up and down the canyon. The story about this stagecoach appearing in the museum today is pretty phenomenal. As I said, 1890, it stopped functioning. It had been used in parades, it had been used in community events in the early 1900s, but by the late 1930s, it was parked in the Kimball family's garage. And there it stayed for decade after decade after decade. It finally came to the museum in about 1989, more than 50 years after it had just been rotting away, if you will, deteriorating in storage. So the museum undertook a several-year conservation and preservation effort to restore the stagecoach back to somewhat of its original appearance with multiple fresh coats of paint. And after our expansion in 2009, we were able to bring that front and center and be able to tell that story. I'm going to rotate us here a little bit. Don't stare too hard, you might get dizzy. There we go, let's see. I'm going to stand on this side here. So we got the meet sign front and center. So when you enter the museum galleries, you can start with an introductory video about the history of Park City and with it the history of Utah, and then you can travel through the exhibit galleries. Here on the main level, we have some of those iconic objects, including the stagecoach. We have a mine elevator that goes from our basement up to our mezzanine level on the 2nd floor. So you can actually stand on one of the elevator cars that would have gone up and down 1,500, 2,000 feet underground. Not just transporting people, but transporting the actual ore cars that are going up and down, bringing the silver ore and the iron ore up out of the mines. And last but not least, the elevators would have also taken the horses down into the mines. And towards the very end of the horses' lives, they would have been brought back out of the mines that very same way. That was something I had absolutely no idea about and was astounded when I heard that there were horses living down in the mines and spent nearly their entire lives in absolute darkness. Their eyes adjusted as would yours or mine, but what a life. So behind me, we talk about the story of the development of Park City. As I mentioned, established in 1885 or incorporated in 1885. We talk about the history of Park City as a Wild West mountain town from about 1880 to 1920. We have vignettes on display of the Smith and Brim grocery store, which you can see the sign for me over my shoulder, shining fairly well off the top of my head right now. But the Smith and Brim grocery store opened in Park City in 1886, and a grocery store operated in that same location for at least the next 50 years. We have a few other vignettes about life in early Park City, turn of the century, around 1900. And then as we move past those vignettes, I have a private experience, so I'm not going to trip over any other visitors right now. But we then, of course, move into what what most of our visitors know of Park City. That's the Sundance Film Festival. I have a mini recreation of the Egyptian theater built in the 1920s behind me here. The Sundance Film Festival started as the United States Film Festival in the early 1980s. It then moved to Park City, and just a few years later, Robert Redford and the Sundance Institute took over management, and they have done so for nearly the past 40 years here in Park City. And then we move into, stand back a little more. We move into skiing and snowboarding. I don't know who told me this, but I've stolen something that I've heard. But that's in the 1950s, 1960s, Park City, the mining operation started dying out. It's not for a lack of silver or anything that they were getting from underground. It's the fact they had dug so deep for 80 plus years that there was no pump in the world that could pump the amount of water that was gushing out of the mountains. They could not keep up with that water level. And so if someone invented a pump that could keep up with the gushing water, then we could keep mining silver. But until that time, that water is just going to keep flowing out of the Spiro Tunnel and from other sources to provide everyone their drinking water, bathing water, dishwashing water, you name it, here in Park City. So by the 50s and 60s, the mines started to dry up, the industry started to die, and Park City had a choice. We could either become a dying ghost town like so many other Western towns, or we can figure out a way to revitalize ourselves and to get people to stay here, to move here, to visit here. And so we have the Treasure Mountains Ski Resort, which opens in 1963, I believe. So Park City very quickly turned from a city of last resorts to a city of posh resorts. So ski resorts start to appear 1960s, 1970s, 1980s. And then I think everyone here likely knows the rest. It has blossomed and developed into the Park City we know today, especially after those Winter Games from 2002. In addition, actually, what I wanted to show you was what we have skied up high, but we actually have a gondola and a ski tower on display in our main history gallery here. Just yet another couple of examples of incredibly large objects we would have never been able to displayed before. One final exhibit component I want to show you. As I am walking backwards, I'll tell you, in addition to the mezzanine level above, where you can get a bird's eye view of this gallery, we also have our basement gallery, which is a true dungeon experience. In that dungeon, you learn more about the mining history here in Park City, but you also can see the original territorial jail. In the basement of the 1885 City Hall was the territorial jail, complete with its stone walls, small square windows, and single wood-burning stove in the middle of the room. And that operated as a jail from 1885 until the early 1950s. See, it's hard to do this exhibit justice, but this is our two-story Megamind exhibit. So we actually have a crosscut example of a mining operation here in Park City. We go down about 1,000 feet below the surface. On the second floor, you can see the actual head frames. You can see the Cornish pump pumping out the water. If you look closely, you can see the elevators moving the miners up and down. You can see the quadricycle and the trains transporting the silver back and forth from the miners to the elevator. So this is probably one of the most popular exhibits in the museum, not just for kids, but for me too. Other adults absolutely love this Megamind exhibit. But we are more than just the Park City Museum. That's one of the things I love about Park City. That's what I love about this museum and this job. There is so much more than just this museum. As I mentioned, we have our off-site location where we host programs and have our collection storage. But we are also actively fundraising and attempting to preserve and stabilize all of the historic mining structures that are here on Park City Mountain and at Deer Valley. 5 years ago, the Friends of Ski Mountain Mining History were formed and very quickly started working on a priority list of 9 structures. The first 7 structures have been saved over the past 5 years. And so moving on to the final 2 structures, the Silver King and the Thanes mines that are on Park City Mountain Resort. We also own and manage the 1885 Glenwood Cemetery, which is located right next to the Park City Mountain Resort, the Marriott Mountainside, I think is what it's called. So the Glenwood Cemetery, it's an open air park. It's open to the public from dawn to dusk. The Glenwood Cemetery was founded by a group of fraternal organizations that were formed here in Park City about the same time that the city was incorporated. But miners and their families would have joined various fraternal organizations for healthcare, for assistance with funeral expenses, as well as a place to be buried. And that was at the Glenwood Cemetery. So the Glenwood is home to many of Park City's first families and a couple generations of their descendants. So I do encourage anyone and everyone, if you're interested in meandering through the Glenwood. I experienced a beautiful fall here in Utah. I understand it was one of the best falls we've had in quite some time, but the yellow aspens in Glenwood made for quite a stunning appearance. In addition to everything we have going on outside, let me backtrack one more time. We do have a changing exhibit gallery as well. We do 3 or 4 traveling exhibits throughout the year in our Tozer Gallery. This allows us to change things up, and it's not just the Tommy knockers that are doing work here in the museum galleries. I suppose I can talk and walk backwards at the same time here. But our next exhibit is opening on November 21st. So here in about 11 days. It's called Black and White. Black and White Images of Dignity, Hope, and Diversity in America. It's an exhibit that's being traveled around the West Coast. Not much to look at here. I'm just proving to you that we are working here with these crates and tables in the background, and Park City's oldest and largest bar as well, which makes for fun events when we do have events in this space. But the exhibit is going to be a collection of black and white photography by a very early African-American photographer named Jack Johnson, the son of a runaway slave. And he photographed African-Americans living and working for the most part in the Midwest, but also in his home of Omaha, Nebraska. So in addition to African-Americans living and working, he also photographed from the 1900s to 1920s groups of blacks and whites living harmoniously at that time, which, you know, from newspaper articles and anything else you may read or research in various other parts of the country, that was not the case at this time. But he was able to photograph and document that particular way of life in the Midwest and in Nebraska. So this particular exhibit, one of our many ways to attempt outreach at a variety of different groups of people here in Park City, and to offer something unique for everybody who does visit us. So I think I'm nearing the end of my spiel here. I will focus us here on the back of Park City's second oldest fire truck, as I then encourage anyone and everyone to come visit the museum. We are open every day of the week from 10 to 5. though we recommend you arrive before 4 so you can at least get enough time in the museum galleries. Please join us as a member. You can come back for free anytime you want. If you join us at the $100 level, you can bring all of your friends and your family whenever they are in town. We certainly have options that are a little higher than that as well. And in addition to all of the work we do as a staff, we also have a variety of volunteer opportunities. We have research and cataloging opportunities that would allow you to do a real deep dive into the archives that we have here in the museum, but also the collections objects that are coming into the museum. So we have a lot of projects working with our objects, working with our research, working with all of the history here. We also have volunteers that help us at our front desk, helping us to greet visitors, provide introductions to the museum, to any visitors who might be interested. We also do a variety of events throughout the year, and we're always seeking volunteers to help staff the check-in table or the registration table, or help us set up or clean up or something like that. So there's a variety of ways that we could certainly use assistance if anyone loves the museum as much as Harriet and I do.
Morgan,
Yes.
you also have opportunities. I know that you have a lot of tours that you bring in children, for schools bring in for tours. Do you have opportunities for people to volunteer to help give those tours?
Yes, yeah, we do school groups and we do private groups. We do walking tours of historic Main Street. We have tours going on at some of our mining structures, but also at the Glenwood Cemetery. So if you're interested in public speaking, if you're interested in sharing that love of history that you might have, we also have opportunities for you to teach, to do the tours to children or to do certain adult group tours as well. So we're absolutely looking for interested parties there.
Great. Morgan, absolutely fantastic. I'm so sorry that your cart won't allow you to go upstairs and downstairs, because there's so many incredible displays, and I have a favorite display downstairs near the jail. And when you took us in and you pointed out the bar, that is a really, really cool. Can you just take a second and talk about what you have in the mirror in back of the bar, that ongoing video? That is, I could sit there for hours watching that. Just
to your point on wanting to go downstairs, while we've been talking, I've been wondering how I would look with a selfie stick and my cell phone and walking around the museum doing the same tour. But when we don't have a video specific to our changing exhibits in the Tozer Gallery, we have a video that plays on a loop. It's 6 or 7 minutes long. But about a dozen years ago or so, we interviewed a lot of Park City's early residents from the 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, to talk about what the city was like before the ski resorts came. And so you learned that Park City, it wasn't just a Wild West town in the 1800s. It was a pretty wild town in the 1950s and 1960s as well, with the drinking and the saloons and the ladies of the night and the brothels and so many other type of activities you would expect from a red light district. But that's kind of what Park City was in the mid 1900s, until they were able to turn the tide, if you will.
It's really great. I didn't realize it was only like 7 minutes long, because every time I come, I watch it for a few minutes and then I leave. And I guess I caught like maybe the end of what I saw prior, and I thought it was longer.
If you were here for 8 hours a day, you would have it playing on a loop in your head.
I'm sure. So why don't we take a few minutes and open it up to questions? I'm sure that many of you have questions from Morgan. So just unmute. It's a small group, and if you have a question, we'd love.
Yeah, I'd like to ask something. It's Tommy Tanzer. Morgan, that was great. I lived here 42 years, and you taught me more in your tour while you were pulling the desk. I mean, it was amazing. David Levinsky would be proud of you, as he does with his zooming of different things. That was just fabulous. So I'll come in, I'll get my membership up to snuff, and I will, I'd love to do the Glenwood Cemetery tour and just listen to you talk. Really did a great job.
Thank you very much.
Wendy Cantor, you had a question?
Sure, except Tara Cantor's making a drink and there's a little noise in the background. First of all, hi, Tommy Tanzer too. You've been a phantom to me. I've wanted to meet you, so I'm glad I'm meeting you on Zoom. So yes, I can't wait to come to the museum. Harriet has really enlightened me. Are there also tours for adults and not children? Do you have do you have docents?
We're in that tricky place where we are coming out of COVID, yet we're still not completely out of the as everyone else is aware. So the number of docent-led tours of the galleries have taken a hit just because of the pandemic. But this part, in 2021, we really ramped up the number of outdoor tours that we've been doing. We've offered a number of hikes and biking tours, along the rail trail and hikes up through the mountains and to some of the mining structures, the Glenwood Cemetery as well. I am hopeful that we will begin to offer some sort of regular tour schedule of the museum exhibits, coming up at some point in the future. But if there is a group, if there are people that are interested, we can make it happen. Absolutely.
Great. Well, look forward to learning the history, and thank you very much for welcoming us our window treatment in the near future.
You're welcome.
It really shows your sense of community.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I think we have time for maybe one more. Okay, well, I'm encouraging everyone on this call, please tell your friends. It is just, I can't tell you how many Park City locals I have spoken to that walk by and never go in. It's an incredible Park City gem. Go in, spend an hour and a half, an hour, and visit this museum. Starting Monday, Temple Har Shalom will have the front window on display. So we have Kathy on this call and Wendy, and thank you, ladies, for taking the lead along with Carol Kotler to put together an amazing display. I told them if they're not careful, Morgan's going to ask them to do every window display from now on. But we'll be on display featuring Hanukkah and featuring the history, which we should do, the history of Temple Har Shalom in Park City, and we'll be there through November 10th. And lots of great volunteer opportunities. So if you're interested, or your friends might be interested, I know Morgan and Mary would love to have you join their team of volunteers. So this was fabulous, Morgan. I want to come back again. It was amazing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Thank you, Morgan and Mary.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody.
Thank you all.